So hello, everybody. You are all very, very welcome to our webinar today. My name is Erica Hearn, and I'm the Employer Relationships Lead here at Grow Remote. Anyone who isn't familiar with Grow Remote can find out so much more on our website, which is growremote.ie. As you all know, we're delighted to be discussing well-being in hybrid and remote teams. Managing well-being is the number one topic by far I've heard from employees this year, whether in our own community or in the ecosystem at large. And that's exactly why we've set this up and exactly why you guys are here today. We have three well-being superstars, if they don't mind me saying, here with us to discuss their own organizational experiences and insights. We are joined by Aoife Greally, People Business Partner for EMEA and APAC at Clio, Eimear Marrinan, Vice President Culture and ESG at HubSpot, and Rebecca Williams, Engineer Development Wrangler at Automattic. All three of these companies are employer partners of ours, meaning they support our mission of making remote work for people, profit, and planet. So if anyone's interested in learning a bit more about how we work with employers and potentially joining us in events like these moving forward, feel free to drop me a line at erica@growremote.ie. So, to my esteemed panel, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, maybe sharing a bit about your organization and your journey with remote work, that'd be brilliant. I think we'll go alphabetically to make it easy and keep it fair. So if we could start with you, Aoife, that'd be great.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Erica. So as Erica said, my name is Aoife and I am with Clio. So Clio are a legal case management software system. We are a small tech firm, so we're based primarily in Canada. We have 1,000 people globally. So Canada, US, Dublin, and we've just opened in Sydney this year. We went fully remote when COVID hit, and we actually never fully returned to the office after COVID. So we have people in hybrid roles. We do have our hub offices still there, so people have the option to go in and use the offices, but nothing is mandated. So typically people are fully remote and from home. Works quite well for us. It's a great benefit for people. So yeah, loving the remote life myself. I'm biased to the core.
So am I, in fairness. So I love to hear that. Eimear, we'll head over to you if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Lovely to see everybody here. So my name is Eimear Marrinan. I'm Vice President of Culture, D&D and ESG at HubSpot. And for those of you who don't know, HubSpot is a customer relationship management platform. So we help organizations with everything from sales, marketing, all the way down to customer support. Our EMEA HQ is based in Dublin. So we've about 7,600 employees globally. About 1,200 of those are in Ireland. We have been, I'd say, a remote-ish company for, almost 10 years. So before COVID, about 10% of our workforce actually worked remotely, but we definitely were not, like I always say, remote conducive. We're remote first in terms of what we did. And then during COVID, we made the transition to hybrid, like a ton of other companies. And we have completely stuck with that. Firm believer that hybrid absolutely is the best approach and helps employees be productive where they work best. So we give our employees three options. They can choose at office, which means they go into an office 3 or more days a week. They can choose at home, which means they're fully remote and work from one of our entities or their home office, whatever works. And then our in-between is something called at flex. So that means you go into an office 2 or less days a week. So it really gives, like I said, everybody the flexibility to choose something that works best for them. I'm an at-remote worker. I've got 3 girls under the age of 7. And so I always say, like loud and proud, I truly would not be able to have a job if I had to actually go into an office every day. I don't truly know how anybody did that before. And so I'm the biggest proponent of remote work and helping people understand that it is definitely the way forward.
Couldn't agree more. And this is coming from someone with 2 boys under 6. So thank God I don't have to call out anymore when they're sick and be like, sorry, there's no way, no one else to mind them. It's really a game changer, I think, just to offer people that flexibility for so many of us. And Rebecca, if you don't mind.
Oh, thank you. So lovely to see everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Rebecca Williams. I am based in County Mayo on the west coast of Ireland, and I am obviously not from these parts originally. I'm from Liverpool originally, moved over to Ireland about 5 years ago. I started to work for Automattic 4 years ago, and you might not have heard of Automattic, but you probably will have heard of an awful lot of the products that we take good care of. We are the home of WordPress.com, WooCommerce, Tumblr, Simple Notes, and many, many other products that just make the web a much better place. We are 100% distributed, always have been, always will be. So it's super interesting to hear from Aoife and Eimear the different options that other companies also organise. But I'm afraid my response to that is really boring. I'm remote. We're all remote, and that's kind of it, really. That's where we all are. But as a result, we do have quite a unique insight into how people cope with remote work from the minute they start. My role oversees onboarding engineers specifically, and we also take a good look into things like productivity and just general engineer satisfaction as well.
Not boring, just invaluable, I would say, Rebecca. But no, it is so nice to have that like fully distributed async way of working represented as well, because as you can imagine, the struggles change a bit from hybrid, fully distributed, and what have you. Thank you so much, I will say, to all of you for being here. Before we start, I do want to invite everyone to ask questions into the chat. Keep it active, keep it informal. We'll be collating all of your questions into a Q&A portion at the end. So know that if you ask it, time willing, it will be discussed. If there's anything, let's say, that you do at your company or you've experienced before in a role that you found valuable, equally, please pop it into the chat. I think, you never know what might inspire people or might help change their work lives. So please do share as much as you can. Let's get started. Do you know what? I'm liking the alphabetical theme, so I think we'll stick with it. So we'll start with you, Aoife. Okay. In my experience, I think well-being as of late has gotten a bit of the like remote work phrase treatment, meaning I've seen it mean so many different things to so many different companies. Personally, and obviously at your organization, how would you define well-being in a professional context?
Really good question. Like, I think what we used to define well-being as, maybe 3 or 4 years ago to what we describe well-being as now, it's completely changed since COVID. And for me personally, I'm thinking it really is looking at the realistic ways that we can support our employees. We used to have, the on-site gyms and pizza Fridays if you were in the office. Like, that is all gone. Now you're looking at well-being, so like their mental health, financial health, career development. And you really need to look at it a holistic way and look at your demographic as well and who you have and tailor it to that. Listen to your employees. But I think it's changed so much and we need to just keep evolving with it. But it encapsulates so many different, like your work-life balance is not now way more important to people. Where they can work is more important. Yeah.
I think when you mention listening to your employees, is that feedback is exactly the most important piece of data you can gather, because what matters to your team today could be different when 10 new people join. It could be different when they move. It could be different. There's so many things that affect it. So yeah, agree fully.
Yeah.
As our resident HR business partner today, sorry to put all the problems and challenges on HR on you, but how can HR departments as well as leadership teams collaborate effectively just to create like an approach that minds employee well-being fully?
That's a really difficult one. And I think the reason for that is trying to get leadership to buy into the value of well-being. And I think you have to start with educating them and showing them the impact that it actually has on their workforce. The impact that if you're looking at sales or we're looking at our engineers, like what that means for them. So we're maybe not going to hit our number. We're not going to ship that project if we don't have our employees at like high well-being. So that can show. The way I kind of get my leaders on board is showing them things like absenteeism rates, productivity, presenteeism. What is it? How does it affect us? So I think getting my leaders on board, so it's going to start from the top down, trickle down, and for them to really buy into it, I think it needs to be super leader-led. And then once it's leader-led, employees start to see that it's actually valuable to the company. It's not just a HR or a people initiative, and they don't feel like they can buy into it. So having it that way and communicate it to them the same way and making sure you have buy-in is invaluable. Yeah, just getting your comms right from the start is so important.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, yeah, we all know at this stage that data is incredibly important in order to allow well-being programs to continue business-wise.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know particularly for you guys, actually, it was in, I think, early 2022 that you launched the flexible paid time off program.
Yeah.
I remember I'd read that you guys saw like an over 100% increase in vacation being taken. So just like you gave that opportunity, changed so much what people felt empowered to do.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, how else can organizations measure the impact of their employee well-being programs?
Look, there's a million ways that you can do it. I think the best ways is like looking at your engagement scores. How are they affected? Like really honing in on if your engagement scores are going up and going down in certain areas and certain teams. I suppose like focus groups, or we do like coffee roundtables, and that's kind of opening that informal platform for people to open up and say how they're feeling, what's going on, what's working, what isn't. I find them personally invaluable. We're a small organization here in Dublin. So sometimes focus groups can be a bit too formal. So we'll do the kind of coffee catch-ups and getting that feedback. But also looking at like your participation rates and things that you put on. So if you're putting on, meditation on a Friday or on a Monday, is it working? Are your participations, are people coming? Maybe even sending out surveys afterwards, asking people what they would like to see. Did they enjoy it? What would they mark it out of 10? I think they're the best ways to kind of see what's working. And if it's not, pivot, change it, make it work for your organization.
Yeah, I think not being afraid to stop something and say it doesn't work is massive.
Absolutely. And it's something we've had to do several times. But like, this isn't working. We have to change it. And sometimes it's that looking at your demographic. Like, do you have more parents that need, 5 o'clock on a Friday isn't going to work for them, and so you move it. It's really important to know it and change it and listen. Listen is my number one thing.
And it's a great one. I suppose my question now would be, because sometimes if I'm looking at, let's say, parents, I know that the rates of burnout for them and stress in particular can at times be a bit higher. Yeah. So how would you suggest that companies prepare for potential challenges related to, let's say, burnout or stress or emotional exhaustion that may arise from prolonged remote and hybrid working arrangements?
I guess not every company has the benefit of flexible paid time off, but if they do, to really push it, and if they don't, making sure that you're looking at people taking their time off, recharging their way. I suppose looking at the benefits that you're providing. If you have an EAP program and you start to see overwhelm in your employees, start pushing that EAP program, take that kind of taboo out of the conversation, maybe in manager one-to-ones. Asking people, how are you really doing? Is there anything that I can do to help you? What is your workload like? It is kind of keeping that communication open. Other ways that we find, that works is having more kind of social connections. That really helps burnout, especially when you're remote, you lose that personal touch. So like kind of like coffee cups and donuts. So we call them donuts here, but it's like having that 30 minutes with somebody you don't know to catch up, learn about them. It kind of helps with that social connection that can help with burnout. But I think my main one is with managers, making sure that they're having those touch points, having those open conversations. And also as a PPP, having my door open, my virtual door open, like I'm here, come to me. I can help, I can talk. I think that's probably the best way to help. Like we're all going to experience it. It's going to be high in our organizations, but I think if we can help limit it in some ways, the communication is probably the way to start.
Totally. And I think even that thing of you saying like, hey, I have my own virtual door open. It's like leading by example is paramount in times like this. Like, are you comfortable sharing potentially what you're going through? Are you comfortable taking the time out for others? That can do so much in terms of creating a culture where people feel open to share.
Yeah, exactly.
Aoife, thank you so much for all your input so far. I think I'll pivot to Eimear for a bit, if that's okay. Eimear, as you mentioned, like so many others in 2020, HubSpot announced that they were shifting to a hybrid company model. In your opinion, with that shift, how has the concept of employee well-being evolved since the widespread adoption of hybrid and remote work?
Yeah, great question. I think, do you know what? I think it's been an interesting 3 years. And I think there is an increased focus on employee well-being for all the right reasons. But I think sometimes what happens is people conflate the burnout that people are experiencing with our shift to hybrid, forgetting that like the last 3 years have been really hard in life. And I think what you've seen is like you had COVID-19 shift to hybrid. And then really quickly after that, we had Black Lives Matter, specifically over in the US. We had a really, really tough macroeconomic environment. We saw a ton of redundancies. We had war in Russia and Ukraine, and we're now seeing like the horrific conflict between Israel and Hamas. And so I think all of that conflated has led to an increased focus on employee well-being. And so I think that's the first thing that I would say. Often people make a direct connection with the level of burnout within their employees and our need to focus on employee well-being because of our shift to a different way of working without actually acknowledging what's going on around us. I think all of that being said, there naturally is our need to maintain intention and be really purposeful around how we think about employee well-being. And I think we need to design programs differently. I think we need to have really specific ways to keep a pulse on employees, because the ability to actually see what's happening with an employee is actually not that it's not there, but it's harder. Like nobody knows what happens in someone's head when they close down a computer screen and they're sitting by themselves in a room. And I think we always say the worst thing is like, you should never coach yourself. Like we've all got off those really hard calls and all of a sudden your own narrative is the worst narrative. So you have to be really thoughtful and intentional around how you tap into employees so you figure out what's happening. I think then on the flip side, the ability to actually offer employee well-being programs to everybody has changed because we have different virtual platforms where we never really had that before. And I think people are being more creative and innovative in solving for well-being in different ways. So I think from an evolution perspective, there's much more of a focus. I think in a way there's many more options, but I also think you have to be much more intentional in terms of how you design and how you keep a pulse on your employees.
100%. And that word intent is just so important. There's nothing wrong with changing your ways, but making sure that you have a good reason behind everything is paramount.
100%. Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of, because I love that you mentioned this, designing programs differently. I know that you and I spoke a bit more closely around the time that HubSpot was launching Connect 4. So yeah. I'd love to hear a bit about that, how it's going, in addition to obviously anything else you found valuable. But my question is, what strategies can organizations use to ensure that their remote workers don't feel isolated or disconnected from their colleagues and, more than anything, company culture?
Yeah, great question. So we, just for context, we test or we pulse our employees 4 times a year as part of our employee engagement survey. And depending on what is happening across the organization or honestly across the world, we'll flex the questions that we ask. What we try and do is we have like a big baseline survey once a year and then kind of 3 like simpler pulse surveys. And so in our baseline last year, we asked a lot of questions around like employee engagement, employee productivity, burnout, motivation, and connectivity. And what we're able to do is we parse out that data across our 3 work preferences. So we can tell really easily if there's any difference between folk that are actually working remotely, folk that are in an office, or folk that are flex. And that data is really helpful. It's also helpful to actually get rid of any myths that folks that are working from an office are much more productive, which is also really useful. What we found in our last survey was that we actually had what we called like a crisis of connection at HubSpot. And so only, I think it was like 60% of our employees felt connected to folks outside of their team. So 40% of people didn't feel like they actually had friends at work, and they felt connected within their own team, but outside of their team, they didn't feel like they had that level of connectivity. And so we designed based on that. We didn't see a big problem in terms of connectivity back to our culture or our mission. It really was like that human touch and feel. And I don't think we were different. I think a ton of organizations were actually experiencing that. And so as a result of that, we created something called Connect 4, Erica, which you mentioned. And that is really our strategy for connecting folk. again, but like solving for the problem that we found. So connecting people outside of their teams and helping people genuinely make friends. People didn't want like a random coffee conversation when they were put in a Zoom room and had to ask super awkward formal questions. They literally wanted to kind of find their group and work. And so the 4 pillars of our Connect 4 strategy is all around purpose, ease, equity, and sustainability. And how we drive connection across those 4 pillars. So connecting with purpose is, again, making sure we're super intentional around when and where we connect people together. Like, you know, we've all heard that narrative that, oh, if people want to find connection, bring them back into an office and bring them back in 3 days a week and name the days. And we really didn't want to do that. So what we decided to do was we named a day across every office and we called it Connection Day. And what we said is, if you want to connect with people and if you truly want to be in an office, like, we're not going to ever force you to come back in, but that's going to like genuinely be the day that there's going to be mass attendance in an office. And so come in on that day. From a connection events perspective, we now organize 6 connection events a year globally. And we find ways for folks to tap into those connection events virtually, if they're remote in person, and then also in an office. So again, like really purposefully creating things, because again, having like an event a week just wasn't working. People are completely burnt out and there's overload. So being really purposeful with how many times you bring people together. So that's kind of the purpose piece. In terms of ease, it's really leaning into technology and making it super easy for folks to connect people together, and also enabling our managers. Like I said, we've got over 7,500 employees. I have 10 people on my culture team, which is epic, but we can't solve for every single team, and every single team is different. And so how can we make it easy for managers to take what we do and actually apply that to their own team? So really build toolkits for everybody to apply that and flex that. And we've also created like little things like we use Slack internally for our internal messaging platform. We have ways that you can log into Slack and be part of virtual mixers. And again, we put in like fun prompts or like get to know you prompts. So it's taking the awkwardness out of it and making something that's a little bit more personal. So just making it super easy to connect with folk. Equity was all around. Again, there was, I think, what we started to do was, if we're doing something in an office, we have to completely recreate that in a virtual world. And we got really stuck with that. And what that meant was we actually weren't doing anything well at all. And so what we kind of went out with is connecting people equitably does not mean that we have to offer the same thing to every single person, but you have to be able to tap into something. So it's okay for us to do something in an office. But what's not okay then is for us to do nothing for folks that actually can't go into an office. And so what we did was we gave all of our remote employees a budget every quarter for them to use and meet folks that were in their vicinity. So as an example, if you're in Mayo, we'll tell people there's 10 other HubSpotters working in Mayo. You've $30 a month or a quarter, go and have coffee and charge it back to the company. And again, that meant that there was like equitable ways for people to get together. And we facilitated a lot of that and kind of called out different times that we would recommend that. And then we also leveraged our leaders and made sure that they were going to not only office locations, but also remote locations. Like in the US, majority of our employees are actually employed nowhere near an office. And so we have, like as a really good example, a huge proportion of HubSpotters in Chicago. And so if a senior leader is traveling, like don't send them to an office where we have 100 people. Let's send them to Chicago and get them in front of those folk and help them meet those folk and connect them. And then finally, sustainability was all around. Part of my role is ESG and focused on making sure that we are really we're really managing our carbon footprint. And so we have to be thoughtful around how to connect people with our carbon emissions in mind. And again, I think like the average age in HubSpot is 29, and I think there is a want for people to just travel whenever they want to meet people. And I think we had to get rid of that myth, because if we do that, we can't afford that as a company, but also it will kill our carbon emissions plan. And so how do we make sure that we're connecting people sustainably? And like I said, we're naming specific times a year when people can come together, and we put out very, very strict travel guardrails, focusing on our leadership layer first, so that actually our ICs can't travel to connect at all. Our leaders can travel a certain number of times a year, but really we have to think about other ways to connect and get people together, be that virtually or in person.
Oh my God.
Those are
Eimear,
brilliant.
so many invaluable insights in that answer. So thank you. I do think enabling your managers just to focus on that for a bit is crucial, because you're right. Teams can be so incredibly different and need extremely different supports. And your team, let's say, or an HR team can't solve for every single issue with every single employee. So what advice would you have for leaders and managers to effectively monitor and support the mental health of their teams?
Yeah. I think first off, again, leading with data is important. And so making sure that you truly do keep a pulse check on employees' well-being through surveys and asking very specific questions around burnout. But honestly, I think it's also creating a level of psychological safety and training your managers so that they are open to having conversations. I think what we found when we first entered COVID was that our managers' ways of checking in on mental health or creating avenues for folk to take to step away and mind their mental health was literally to say, oh, take a breath, take a pause. And like, how insulting is that if you truly are struggling with your mental health, to have somebody just turn and say, yeah, take a breath and then you're grand and here's your huge workload and none of your deadlines are changing and we don't have any resources. And so we spent a lot of time creating a level of psych safety. We trained all of our managers on psychological safety. And then we actually encouraged our managers to talk about their own mental health. And we encouraged our executive team to talk about their mental health, because you have to lead with a level of vulnerability when it comes to employees, like to your well-being, and you do have to lead from the front. And so that really helped. If you've got the most senior person in your organization telling their employees that they're struggling and what they're doing to actually manage that, all of a sudden as an IC, I think it's a lot easier to talk to your manager about that, but your manager has to be equipped to handle that conversation and then point people in the right direction, either tapping into your HR business partners or into the resources and kind of platforms that you have available in your org.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I remember at my last organization, we had just rolled out like mental health days, essentially. I'd never taken one in my career, although I'm 30, I'm up there in age. And I was like, God, this is incredible. And I was shocked at, after I'd taken a few days, the amount of my team and people on other teams who felt empowered to do it just because they hadn't seen it, like shown to them previously. So you're right, that leading with vulnerability, especially in your senior staff, is incredible. A tiny bit of a pivot, but as I know it's another passion of yours, I want to talk quickly about HubSpot's 2023 Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Report, because it has some really impactful insights as to how HubSpot promotes DEI. Graham, I think if you could pop that into the chat for everyone, that'd be great. What would you say, what role does diversity, equity, inclusion play in the well-being of employees in remote hybrid settings, and how can organizations address these aspects effectively?
Yeah, a good question. I think, so it's like being a hybrid company actually helps our DI&B agenda, first of all, because as we think about creating a diverse organization and making sure we've true representation in our employee base, being able to hire from a ton of different markets is epic. And I think that narrative is often forgotten when you're talking about the benefits of hybrid. I also think, again, it gives, caregivers, people with neurodiversity challenges, even people that have that need specific accommodations, it helps them because you can have a level of flexibility that you never had before. So DI&B actually hybrid helps our DI&B agenda. I think, though, there's some things that we have to be really thoughtful of. So in the US, the majority of our BIPOC employees actually work remotely. And so 90% of our BIPOC employees work remotely. And part of that, by the way, is because of the markets that we can now hire from. But also part of it is the psychological safety that you need to make sure exists. If you are a Black employee and you're going into an office that is all of a sudden full of white employees, like that is something that you have to be really thoughtful about and really be intentional around how you create a level of psych safety. And so, again, I think it is around creating psych safety across the board. I think it's around creating like communities and safe spaces for everybody. And so we have, we lean heavily on our employee resource groups at HubSpot. We've got 5 ERGs that are actually run by my DI&B team. and making sure that that there is true safe space for folks to come and find the group that they feel like they belong to. I think that's also really important. And then again, I think it is constantly getting feedback and acting on that feedback as well. So hope that gives a bit of an insight.
Yeah, it's a brilliant one. Thank you so much. And I'm going to shift one last time to Rebecca at Automattic. I expose myself as a massive advocate for lifelong learning. I've always loved that one of Automattic, like a part rather of Automattic's company creed is like, I will never stop learning. I'd love to hear from you. In what ways do you think organizations can promote continuous learning and skill development for remote and hybrid workers? One, to enhance their overall job satisfaction, but also their well-being.
That's a brilliant question. Thank you. And yeah, I think the learning culture within Automattic does very much start with the creed. It is literally, we have a company creed. You're absolutely very welcome to go and take a look at it. And the first line is, I will never stop learning. And we absolutely embody that. And we literally start from the moment someone comes in to trial with us. We continue that through onboarding, and it also continues up for onwarding, as we call it, after onboarding. And I think that it's really important. And again, I think something that both Aoife and Eimear have mentioned in their insights has been leading from the front, and we are absolutely reliant upon our leads, who will also demonstrate that they want to continue their own professional development. And that is really impactful for the rest of the team, especially newcomers coming on board, because they realize that they have the space and they have the agency to go ahead and either build on their own professional development or even learn new skills. And obviously, it does depend on the size of the organization, whether there is a big budget for those sorts of activities, in which case, you do have a little bit more free rein, but you can be quite creative with these sorts of approaches as well. Things like team learn-ups, that's a really interesting approach that we've seen work really well. So if you've got someone in the team who perhaps has a skill that other people in the team could learn, everyone jumps on the call and we talk through that, and it's used as a really good knowledge exchange session. That doesn't cost very much, if anything at all. So that is definitely something that other teams, perhaps with smaller budgets, could really lean into and make that part of their curriculum. And other things that we've seen work really well is for team leads to keep professional development at the absolute front of all the one-to-ones that they have with people in their team. So, once you've gone through the progress, any kind of challenges, any blockers, what do you want to focus on for this next project? What do you want to focus on for this next quarter? And see if there are ways that you can empower your employees to take those opportunities and really drive their own professional development.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Graham, but we're about to start our own team learn-ups at Grow Remote after our last meetup IRL. So it's lovely to see that other people are doing it and it's worked quite well. I suppose my second question, Rebecca, would be, since Automattic is, for those of you who don't know, a massive asynchronous communication pioneer in the industry, what role do technology and digital tools play in supporting, or equally, I suppose, hindering employee well-being?
That is an absolutely brilliant question. I'll start with supporting and take it from there. So the obvious resource that we have are access to apps and things like, any like meditation, that sort of thing, that you can just take 10 minutes out of your day, maybe take a walk, listen to some mindfulness meditation, that sort of thing. And also YouTube resources as well, just different material, just being a bit creative with the material that you can access and engage with, just to do what you need to do to just provide a better foundation for your own mental health. One of the other big things as well, thinking about the work tools that we use at Automattic. So like Eimear mentioned, we use Slack, and that has for me, that has definitely brought an interesting dimension to the way we work, because I didn't realize how much effort it was sometimes to put your makeup on and go into the office. And if you've had a bad night the night before and you think, oh my gosh, I've got to put on this sort of show that, and be present for the day, I can still do a day's worth of work without having to, interact too much with people, or, if I'm just feeling a little bit quiet that day, I can literally just crack on with my day, say hi to everyone on Slack. And that for me has been a huge benefit to my day-to-day work, and particularly in terms of, being a parent, and perhaps you've been up late one night helping with homework, and sort of think I'm not feeling too sociable today, so I'm just going to keep my head down and get on with my day's work, still be productive, but perhaps not be quite as sociable as perhaps I would have been in an office. And also the enablement to be able to work where I am most productive. So today I'm in a co-working space. Yesterday I was at home. That works out really well for me in with my schedule. So just having that ability to be able to do that. The way it hinders, this is definitely something I can lean into a bit, is definitely screen time, because I do find myself, and I'm sure there's an awful lot of people as well, who swap one screen at the end of the day for another screen, and I switch from my laptop to my phone, and then I just scroll social media mindlessly for several hours until something more interesting happens. That is definitely one way that digital tools aren't super helpful for hybrid or remote working. Being really intentional, I think intentionality has come up quite a lot as well during this session today, and just being really intentional about boundaries. I think that is something that people really, really don't take into account when considering remote working. It's so easy to put Slack on your phone. It's so easy to log into your work email. So when you do pick up that phone, and you do naturally start to drift back to, well, I wonder whether anyone's ever picked up that conversation that I started just before I logged off, and then you do find yourself doing a few extra hours of work. So that is definitely another way that it can hinder mental health and well-being as well. The other thing as well, I think this is just probably a note for people switching, particularly leads, switching from working in an office environment to working in a remote environment. You don't have the luxury of being able to look up and see people in the office who might be visibly having a bad day or might be visibly struggling. You don't have that luxury anymore. So you have to be more intentional about going out and seeing how people are doing, and whether that's just with a very informal stand up at the start of the day where you do a red, green, yellow traffic light to say how you're feeling, maybe list a few things that you're doing, and for the lead to sort of say, right, okay, someone's logged in today as red, they've got a to-do list today as long as my arm, I need to go in, just check in with them privately to just see how they're doing. That is something that you have to be more intentional about, going back to intentionality. And it is definitely something that can hinder progress when you're moving from, when you're just not used to it, basically. If you're expecting people in your team to say when they're going to have a bad day, they probably won't. You have to be really mindful of putting those checks in places to make sure everyone on the team is feeling good.
Oh, absolutely. I have one more. Actually, you know what? I'll start with a different one. So being part of a 100% distributed company with a fully remote mindset, which potentially some of us on the call have never done before, what would you say are the potential long-term impacts of remote hybrid work on employee well-being? And if you don't mind sharing, do you have any answers rather, to solve for that? Like, how should organizations adapt their strategies to keep that in mind?
This is a brilliant question, and it would be really easy to talk about things like burnout and overworking and the things that people are genuinely quite scared about when they think about remote work, and particularly if you haven't been exposed to it previously. So you might be thinking, well, if I let my team go and work remotely, they might just be sitting and watching Netflix all day. I don't really have much of an idea. But I'm actually going to turn that on its head a little bit and talk about the positive impact of remote working, which is increased productivity. And it is things like increased employee satisfaction, and just generally being able to allow people to work in a way that works best for them and where works best for them as well. And also being able to, I think this is something Eimear mentioned as well, being able to tap into that global workforce as well. You're not restricting yourself to people within a 20-mile radius of your business. You're literally opening up the floodgates to talent from different parts of the world. You may never have ever spoken to these people, and now they're working in your team and bringing their skills and knowledge to your organization. I think the to get to that point, there are definitely some things that you have to be mindful of. And I think the first thing, it seems to be a bit of an elephant in the room, is being able to trust people will do the best job that they can when given the environment to work in the best way that they can, and assuming good intent. So, if someone is perhaps not, you're not able to see someone in front of you typing away or on a telephone call or whatever, just trust that they are actually getting the job done, or that they will come to you and ask a question. If there is a problem with that, that's perhaps something that can be addressed through the hiring process as well. Consider async as well. This is something that I know an awful lot of companies are a little bit nervous about, and it is really easy when you've got everyone in a team working in the same time zone, even remotely. If everyone is logging on at 9 o'clock and logging off at 5 o'clock, that's super easy to manage. But you will get so much more out of the people in the team if you enable async working, and that doesn't necessarily mean working 9 to 5 in the same time zone, or even working 9 to 5 in their own time zone, just allowing people to work on a schedule that suits them the best. So, it could be working 7 till 3, or it could be, working after the kids have gone to bed or whatever. And if the role allows for that, then definitely lean into that as well. And leading by example, setting boundaries, being really clear about, as a lead, being able to say, well, okay, I'm shutting my laptop now. I won't be responding to any more messages now until I come back online. You don't have to explicitly say that, but if your team can see you setting that example, that is definitely something that they will be able to lean into. And then you're going to avoid things like, people feeling like they have to overwork because they are working remotely. And just being very intentional. What works in an office will not always work remotely. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to work at all. It's probably an extremely good tool to use in an office, but just being a bit creative and being intentional about any decisions you make about bringing in any initiatives for remote workers.
It's funny, even myself, that I would have always thought, God, no, I'd be great at async. I didn't realize, even in my previous remote roles, how much we just default to synchronous communication. I would send a message like, do you have time for a quick 5-minute call? Yeah. And not even realize there was anything wrong with that. So I think just giving yourself the flexibility to challenge what you've done your entire career and in all your roles and change it is so important, and definitely keeping the positive business impacts in mind. Obviously, that's magic to Grow Remote's ears. So thank you for highlighting that. I want to ask you one more, Rebecca, if that's okay. Just in your career, whether it's at Automattic or not, what policies and initiatives have you seen different organizations implement successfully to, let's say, promote health and wellness in remote and hybrid environments?
Yeah, at Automattic we have access to employee assistant program as well. So I think Aoife mentioned that earlier. That is definitely something that we've taken advantage of. We have a whole range of benefits as well. So we have an open AFK policy, and we have career coaching as well. So that is something that is an excellent way to avoid things like burnout, and also manage time. Your own time management. That's something that we see some people struggle with when they move from an office environment to a remote environment. We also have access to fitness apps, mindfulness apps, and all those good things. But I mean, that is obviously where we're quite privileged, because we do have those benefits in place. But there are other things that we do, and I have seen other people do as well, to encourage well-being and mental health support in smaller organizations. And it's things like, encouraging speakers to come and, do a recorded session with a team, with the whole company, about things that are important to employees. So that could be about psychological safety. It could be about managing your mental health. It could be about, implementing really good work-life balances, just anything that is important. And again, it goes back to listening to what is important to employees and trying to address that need. And yeah, again, I know I sound like a bit of a parrot here, but leading by example. It is something that at Automattic, we say you do your best work in the time you need to do it. The length of time you're online doesn't really matter if you're not able to actually produce the work that you want to produce. So you know, if we can see our leads do that, then that is really, really impactful to the rest of the team, because we can see people coming on at a time when, you know, they're feeling super productive, they're throwing out some amazing work, and then they go offline for a few hours and then come back on later. And just feeling empowered to do that is enormous, really. And again, it costs very little money to be able to encourage leads to do that, and therefore have that trickle down effect to the rest of the team.
Absolutely. Rebecca, thank you so much.
No problem.
I think I'm just going to check. Yeah, we're nearing up on time. So I'm going to have a quick look and see if we have any questions popped into the chat. Otherwise, if people haven't asked anything and want to quickly now, please do feel free. We're happy to get to as much as we can. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I see one from Leon here. Graham, this is probably for you. I'm going to ask you to step in, not to put you on the spot. But Leon's question is, are there ever any Grow Remote meetups in real life in Leitrim or anywhere in the northwest of Ireland that he can never see any on the website?
Good question. I think the first thing to do is make sure, Leon, that you and everybody else has got access to our events page. So I will drop that link in there. In terms of where, there are 9 happening this week, from the northwest to the southeast of the country. So let's have a check and see what's happening in Leitrim. And if there's not something happening, what we love to do is help you make them happen. So check out the events link. I'll drop it in there. If there isn't an event for you, let's get something set up and let's bring remote workers together. And also, Erica, if I might, a kind of a segue into a question I did get there, and anyone from the panel can answer it, just to maybe touch back on the importance of bringing people together intentionally in person, whether that's through company retreats or local events. Thanks for sharing that. So yeah, question just to Aoife, Eimear or Rebecca. Do you bring your remote teams together in person or with any regular cadence?
Yes, at Automattic we do. It's an optional option, I was going to say then. It's an optional thing at the moment, travel. We understand everyone's got different comfort levels at the moment with travel, but we do encourage teams to meet up about twice a year, and then we have a division meet up once a year as well.
We do. So we've a couple of things. So we have, obviously all our remote workers have their remote budget, and so they can choose to meet up once a quarter, funded by the company. There's no set time to do that. They can do that at any stage within a quarter. But then we do facilitate meetups during our connection events. So that's 6 times a year. And so we'll arrange and kind of put out different ways that folks can get together. So as an example, we just had Bring Your Families to Work Day last Thursday. And then we encourage folks to actually get together remotely with their families, like whatever that is, or their friends, whoever their loved one is. So that 6 times a year is really important. And then we'll also have like a handful of moments throughout the year where our leaders will travel to, or I would say highly populated remote locations, and we'll again facilitate and kind of fund those meetups.
Nice.
Love that.
At Clio, we have a Moments That Matter program. So we'll do team day once a year in January. So we try to bring everybody together to their hub location once a year. And then Moments That Matter, we try and do at least every quarter, which is typically your team come together in real life. We see benefits from that.
That's lovely. You guys, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, and Graham, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there are. Perfect. We'll leave it there for now. Before we close out, I just want to say a big thank you to all of our guests, Aoife, Eimear, Rebecca, and our chat master, Graham. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today, speak with us, and share invaluable information that I'm sure everyone attending can take back to their own companies and even future roles. I hope you guys have a brilliant rest of your day and are empowered to keep well-being at the forefront of your minds in your own teams moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Erica.
you so much. Thanks for everything.
Thanks, Graham.